Hey guys, welcome back to Libby's Lounge, Patreon edition, where we are recording the unofficial audiobook for the Assassin's Alliance. We are on chapter 36. Let's dive in. Chapter 36. Maureen. On a scale from I want to bawl my eyes out to I don't care if someone shoots Charlie right now, where do you stand? Charlie asked, eyeing her on the couch like the science experiment she was. Maureen had spent the last 3 days in the lab. With Charlie as her guide, her third sin trip wasn't that bad, besides the crippling pain in her spine and the ice in her veins. Perhaps it was a lack of intimidation, or Charlie trying to interact with her dead, but talking to blank space, even in Maureen's hallucinations, that helped. Although this was better than being shot after having my daughter stolen, I think I don't care if someone shoots Charlie still falls somewhere in the middle of that scale. It's a sin trip. But talking about Catherine without a second thought, Maureen snapped her mouth closed, realizing how crass her statement had been. How could she speak about Catherine that way? The stirs of panic rose in her gut, and the urge to tamp them down was nearly overwhelming. But she pulled the image of Catherine in her arms to the forefront, letting the panic rise until the sadness took back over. The grief washed over her worse than before and sunk into every fiber of her being, a pain so deep it pushed the ice from her system. That was a new one. She dropped her head into her hands, breathing through it. Mo? Give me a second, she said. They'd spent the first day studying and practicing grounding techniques, but they were all flying out the window as her nervous system tried to integrate back. I lied. I would be happy to see someone shoot you right now. A light touch on her back startled her, and Maureen sat up, accepting the hot cup of tea Charlie handed her before sitting on the coffee table, notepad and recorder in hand. Maureen took a sip, the lavender chamomile hitting her senses and slowing her heart rate down. Ready? Charlie asked. As ready as she would ever be, so she nodded. Charlie clicked the recorder. Subject, Maureen. Research log. Sin version 3, first administered dose. This is Dr. Charlotte Hastings recording observations on the effects of sin following the most recent re-administration. This is the third dose of sin and the first dose of the third generation. Maureen, walk me through your first moments after receiving the antidote. It was either the emotional purge or the new dose of sin, but the idea of returning home didn't feel unbearable. She waved at the guards as she headed for the front door, but Charles stopped her. Miss McCall? She turned to look at the guard station, the weight of the last 3 days starting to wear on her. What's up? Senior would like a word. Fuck. Elijah had told her what to say, but she didn't remember a word of it. Is Mr. Wayward in the building? He's in his office, but Senior... Thanks, Charles, she said before he could direct her to Francis again. I appreciate it. She forewent the elevator, not wanting to spend any more time in the lobby, and took the stairs. It was a humbling climb to the 19th floor, something she used to sprint up for fun, now threatened to take her to her knees. She needed to start working out again ASAP. The hall was empty. Elijah's office door cracked. With a deep breath, she wiped her hands on her pants before knocking. Enter. His voice sent a shot of adrenaline through her, her panic and grief fleeing in favor of being on guard and focused. She pushed the door open, heart trying to lodge in her throat as she laid eyes on him. He hadn't been expecting her, eyes widening in surprise, and he put down his pen. To what do I owe the pleasure? He asked, folding his hands beneath his chin. Francis, Maureen said, pushing the door closed. She should feel terrified to ask him, but a strange calm rested over her, and the words left her before she could stop them. He summoned me, and I, for the life of me, literally, can't seem to recall what the fuck my story is supposed to be. Elijah's lip curled, and she couldn't tell if it was annoyance or amusement. Welcome back to the land of the living. I was starting to get bored. Anger pulsed through her. Where did he find the audacity? My story? She repeated. Aren't you curious how Rosemary's getting along as a new mother? Do you think she'll fail to teach Catherine manners the way your mother clearly did? The anger flared again, nearly uncontrollable, the urge to slam his face into the desk racing to her fingertips. She clenched her fists. My story, Maureen ground out. Please. The last few months have been pretty hazy, something to do with major blood loss and trauma, if I had to guess. His lip curled in a vicious smile. You were quite the hero. Saved my life. That's what happened. That's what they know. Elijah leaned back, watching her closely. She scoffed, crossing her arms, the pain from the sin trip now lingering in her muscles. This should be good, she said, and then bit into her cheek to stop herself from saying anything else. What the fuck was wrong with her? She'd always been snarky with him, but this? He ignored the sarcasm. We were ambushed by Hale's leak, Zach, and his contacts at Onyx. You, out of duty, out of loyalty, stepped in and took a bullet meant for me. I barely managed to get us out alive." "And what happened to Zach?" she asked, her voice sharp, since we're rewriting history and all. Elijah didn't blink. "He didn't make it." Maureen barked out a dry, humorous laugh. "No shit." Rosemary spared no details on what Rufus had done. There wasn't a body left to identify. But what did you do? Gut him? Burn him alive? Get creative? He waved a dismissive hand. "Irrelevant. What matters is you're Hale's hero, and you're alive. When you meet with Senior, tell him exactly what I said. You stepped in to protect me, took a bullet for me." He paused, letting the weight of the words settle. Maureen shook her head, biting back the urge to lunge at him. She'd already lost too much. She couldn't afford to lose more. Instead, she gave him a cold smile. One day, she would watch him burn right alongside Jeffrey. "Thank you," she said, spinning on her heel to leave. "I've not dismissed you," he said lightly, and she spun back around, swallowing a heavy sigh. "I'd like to move forward with Legacy Inc. next week." "I know," she snapped. "Those conversations I remember crystal clear. Probably something to do with not having major blood loss at the time." The corner of his lips lifted, and he capped the pen he'd been using. "Why don't we go see Senior together? Make sure your recollection of events stays on track." He stood, not giving her the option to say no. Elijah didn't bother knocking on Frances's door. He pushed it open, interrupting a meeting. Frances froze mid-conversation, eyes landing on her, and a flash of relief crossed his face. The first thing she'd wanted to do when she got home was run to him, to feel the fatherly embrace and tell him how sorry she was. But Elijah forbade it. A smart move. She would have spilled everything that first day. She wanted to spill it now, be damned about the consequences. "You'll have to excuse us," Frances said, looking back at his guest. Maureen looked too, the wave of dizziness hitting, almost taking her to her knees. Peter Hale sat in the office, the shock of seeing her clear on his face. On the heels of recovering from massive blood loss, enduring emotional trauma no woman should ever have to experience, and a voluntary sin trip, she probably looked on the brink of death. But she offered him a tight smile and bowed her head. "Pardon the interruption," she said. "Some of us were raised in a barn and don't know how to knock." She glared at Elijah and caught a hint of amusement in his eye. "Some of us were raised with class," he said, turning to face her. "And then there's whatever happened to you." Despite the company in the room, Maureen couldn't help the laughter that spurred out of her. The appreciation for Elijah unwittingly insulting her father brought a strange warmth to her chest. "You don't know the half of it," she said, looking back at her father. Pink tinged his cheeks, but he held her stare. This must have been why Frances wanted to see her, to prove she was alive and well. Well, she was alive. "We can come back," Maureen offered, not wanting to give Elijah the opportunity to start asking the head of Hale security questions. "No," Peter said, rising to his feet. "I've seen what I've needed to see. Thank you for your time, Mr. Wayward." They shook hands, Frances rising as well. "I'll be in touch." The disappointment she'd gotten so familiar with stared back at her from her father's eyes, and Maureen lifted her chin in defiance. Was he disappointed to see her alive? He certainly couldn't be disappointed in her company, since as far as he knew, he'd hoard her out to them. A thick tension filled the room at his departure. "Well, that was fun," Maureen said, breaking the silence and taking a seat, her bones nearly melting into the couch. She draped her arms across the back of it, holding herself up, and allowed a smirk to cross her face, tilting her head to look at Elijah. She could have blown his entire story right there. "I'm surprised you didn't question him as to why his asset went rogue. Or is that considered bad business to flaunt your victory with your savior by your side?" Elijah glowered. "Careful, Maureen. You're treading on dangerous grounds." "Enough," Frances scolded, as if they were two kids fighting and not mortal enemies marking territory. Frances rounded the desk, eyes searching her face. She kept the smug expression plastered, her fingers rubbing along the top of the couch to keep her in the moment. But the longer he looked at her, the harder the grief she buried fought to claw its way out of its box. Her bravado threatened to break, and she looked away. "What did you do to her?" The ire in Frances's voice mimicked the night Elijah had dosed her, and she looked up. Frances's steady arm was outstretched, his cig aimed for Elijah's head. Elijah hadn't responded quick enough, his arms raised in front of him. "You took her for a year, and this is what you returned to me." A pulse of adrenaline raced through her, the grief dropping back in response, and she scooted herself forward. If Frances put a bullet in Elijah, would that solve all their problems? She'd been worried he wouldn't believe them. Believe her, giving Elijah the chance to sabotage. As if he could sense her relief, Elijah moved his annoyed expression to her. So you're tracking Maureen. If anything happens to me, there are orders to put a bullet in her brain and deliver the corpse to your team. The image his words evoked turned Maureen's stomach. You're a monster, she spat, trying to whisk the image away, but it refused to go. We already knew that, he agreed. Tell him to lower the gun. She didn't want to. The idea of his brains painted on the wall brought a sense of vindication, but she wasn't willing to call his bluff. With a shaky voice, she did. Please, Francis, lower the gun. Tell me why, he said, not moving a muscle. I have been kept in the dark far too long. What does he have on you? She looked at Elijah for direction. If she told Francis, would he kill Catherine anyways? How much could she say? Fuck. But Elijah just stared at her, challenge sitting behind his gaze. Maureen, Francis prompted. I will pull this trigger if you do not tell me what the hell has been going on. No. Maureen launched to her feet, flinging herself between them. You can't. Francis immediately lowered the weapon and stepped back, face filling with disbelief. Maureen could feel Elijah's smirk behind her, and she turned and shoved him. You are an asshole. Careful. Yeah, dangerous grounds, blah, blah. You're not going to do shit to me right now, or you just wasted a year. You want this to happen? I'll make it fucking happen, but don't you dare touch a fucking hair on her head. She turned back to Francis. Elijah wants out of the legacy. He's already created, to be honest, she said, hating the fact that it was a good idea, a separate entity that has been functional with limited success in DC. Silence met her declaration. Francis's brow crinkled in anger. I asked you what he had on you. She swallowed hard, but before a word could form, Elijah answered. She got herself knocked up by Seamus Maguire. Imagine the damage that could have been done by bringing that child into the legacy. A bastard by 2 non-bloods destroying the elite blood team. I'm doing you a favor by keeping it hidden. Heat flushed over her face, the disappointed look from Francis like a knife to her heart. Is this true? He asked. She licked her lips, trying to talk around the lead ball that rose in her throat. It's not what it sounds like, she said. Yes, but the circumstances. And then Elijah. Where's the child now? Francis looked between them, but Maureen refused to answer. Elijah could be the one to spill his sins. Rosemary has done the right thing and taken her in. Francis scoffed. You mean she's holding your leverage? She's a wayward now, and the only way to prove she isn't is to ruin your precious team. Those are your sons on that team, Francis countered. They are weak-minded like you, following antiquated laws, Elijah said. Legacy Inc. is an opportunity to bring legacy into the 21st century. Legacy Inc. sounds like a paid-for-hire service. Francis shifted his gaze to Maureen. Why didn't you come to me? I tried, Maureen confessed. Maureen, Elijah warned, but the cards were already on the table. This was just going to accelerate the timetable. What? She snapped and turned to face him. You holding my newborn daughter hostage and threatening to blow her brains out kind of set the stage already. She looked back at Francis. Just let him go. Please. Francis scowled. I can't just let him go. That's not how this works. How will I explain this to the board that I compromised the very foundation of the legacy? Don't, Elijah said with a shrug. Maureen isn't selling the true vision, are you? She swallowed hard. When they discussed his grand idea, it had been a merger, getting Legacy Inc. set up and then merging the 2 entities. The problem was he could only see the end result and kept missing the part where Legacy Inc. needed to exist first. This is a merger, starting with the elite blood team. They work in complete opposition to each other, Francis exclaimed, his voice rising. For now, take a good long look at the laws, Dad, Elijah said, the word loaded with venom. Do they serve the best interest of all people, or just the people we are forced to serve? We should get a choice. Ruth should have had a choice. It was as if all the air had been sucked out of the room. Maureen had no idea who Ruth was, or what happened to her, but from the look on Francis's face, she'd been someone important to him, to them both. Elijah, she should have never been asked to do it, Elijah whispered harshly. She never even wanted to be on the team. That's not how it works. I know, Elijah yelled, and it needs to change. Threatening to kill innocent children isn't the answer, Francis snapped. I will kill every last person if it means the legacy is dismantled, Elijah ground out. Ruth was innocent, and the legacy killed her. Francis rounded the desk, lowering back into his seat. He rested his hand on top, gun still visible. It's not that simple. You can't just dissolve the legacy. There's an intricate system for funds and information. I may be in charge, but there are fail-safes. A whole sect of mercenaries tasked with keeping the balance of power. When they find out, then don't let them find out. He shrugged. Legacy Inc. is already happening. This will change the future. Maureen caught the twitch of Francis's lip as he worked out what to say. I will not give you the power to destroy the legacy. What happened to Ruth was a tragedy, but we saved thousands of lives a year. Elijah's face darkened, but Francis continued. I will not interfere with you building Legacy Inc., and I will give you access to the team. Maureen's mouth dropped open. Under the condition you can convince them it's a worthy idea without coercion. A smile lifted Elijah's cheeks. And Maureen? Francis regarded her with a frown. She's with the team, he said. However, I assume she's already pledged her allegiance to you. Her stomach dropped. She had, but not by choice. I do need a word with her to discuss and close up ongoing missions before I release her. Maureen hated that she looked to Elijah for his approval to stay, but Francis was right. Elijah owned her. Of course, he said to Francis, then smiled at her. I'll send Catherine your love. She felt the urge to tell him to fuck off, giving a blank stare as he left the office. Ringing echoed in her ears as the door slammed shut. Maureen fumbled across the office, dropping down into the couch. What had she just done? Maureen? Francis's cool voice vied for her attention, but her mind bounced from the image of Catherine's dead body to Seamus's wail of pain when he realized what had happened. The couch sunk beside her, and she looked at Francis, the soft compassion no longer visible on his face, and it hurt. We have to talk about your father. A laugh left her. After all that, you want to talk about Peter Hale? Well, we both know Peter didn't send Zach to kill Elijah. What happened with that? The entire scenario felt like a lifetime ago, and she trudged through her tired brain to pull up the memory. Why does that matter? Because I've been fielding Peter's inquiries since, and not just with Peter, the boys too. Peter convinced them you were on a critical mission for him, but you need to show face or Mike is going to go after Andrew because he's 100% sure he's killed you. And that is a war we cannot field as long as Elijah is well. The absurdity dragged a laugh from her. What? You went on vacation with him and never came home. Maureen's face fell. Did Mike? Francis nodded. Waited for him at your apartment and got into it with Andrew. Andrew handled it well, but I need you to put them at ease. Zach was meeting Rosemary, Maureen said, the story falling from her lips. She didn't hold back, telling him of Jeffrey's betrayal and the gruesome details of Catherine's birth. She was glad she dumped it on Charlie first, the emotional disconnect allowing her to get through it. He didn't interrupt, nodding along. I'm sorry, she finished. I let you down. I survived, he offered, kindness in his voice she didn't deserve. As you always have and always will. You're not mad? She asked. Oh, I'm livid, but not at you. I created that monster. I should have seen it earlier. And Jeffrey? A look of disgust crossed his face. I won't tell him I told you, Maureen said. Whatever you need me to keep quiet, I can. I'm sure he knows you're spilling it all. If he didn't want you to, he wouldn't have let you stay. He wants me to know how far he's infiltrated, how far he's willing to go for this. Who is Ruth? She asked, the question so soft she thought maybe he hadn't heard it. But he adjusted on the couch, a heavy sigh leaving him. Ruth was Elijah's little sister, my youngest daughter. You had more than one? He nodded. Elijah had 2 older siblings who died in the field. It had a huge impact on him. Ruth was not cut out for this life. She was a dreamer and an artist. Moisture gathered in his eyes. She loved the theater. I used to meet June there, trade information while Ruth enjoyed the shows. That was where I first saw you perform. What happened to her? She asked, ignoring the spike of sadness at June's name. She always suspected they were closer than he let on. To Ruth. A field operation gone wrong. She was asked to do something she was inexperienced at, and she died. How old was she? 16. The number hit her like a punch to the ribs, the same age she had been when she first realized her life wasn't her own anymore. He looked at her then, something unreadable in his gaze. You reminded me so much of her when I met you, except you were built for this life. A slow, cold understanding crept through her. That's why Elijah hated me so much. He thought you were replacing her. There was a pause, just long enough for her to see the truth in his eyes before he spoke. In a way, I was. A sharp breath slipped from her lips. Losing Ruth was a huge failure. It left a hole in all of us. He exhaled, dragging a hand down his face before looking at her again. You filled that hole for me. Maureen felt a strange mix of emotions claw at her chest. Anger, grief, guilt. He hadn't wanted her, but to live the legacy of a ghost. How much of his pride had been for her, and how much had been for the potential of a dead girl? I should go, she said, and stood quickly, the room spinning around her. Maureen, Elijah wants the graveyard contracts, and my father has them. So I need to go back anyway. I'll make nice, and I'll handle the boys. Tell them... What was she going to tell them? She'd been gone for a year, and now she could never go home. What do they believe happened to me? Another heavy sigh left him. He hung his head and ran a hand over the back of his neck. That you successfully pursued and eliminated the leak and were pulled into another mission before you could return. Your cover is solid. Another set of secrets to keep straight. It felt like her entire being was an overstuffed filing cabinet bursting at the seams. Tell them you're getting married, Francis said. That you have an inn and you're going to start a family. I'll give some intel that will make it worth it to them. Maureen blanched at the idea, hands going to her stomach, the only place Catherine had ever been safe. She would never have kids again. She didn't even know if she could. Francis looked up at her silence, horror crossing his face. Oh, Maureen, I didn't mean... I know, she said, but his words made her realize for the first time that she might not be able to give Andrew an heir. Tears rolled down her cheeks. It's just... Andrew wants kids. The legacy needs heirs, and I... She roughly wiped at her face. Each time she thought she had a handle on this mess, she found herself in a deeper hole, farther from getting out. Maureen took a shaky breath, forcing herself to bury the pain again, even as her hands trembled at her sides. I'll take care of it. Hail, she said, voice steadier than she felt. Francis nodded, relief flickering across his face, but she barely saw it. The walls of the room were closing in, pressing against her ribs, suffocating her. Married. Children. The words echoed in her mind, hollow and mocking. She had a child. Catherine had been stolen, and this was the only path to protect her. If that's all, I should go. She turned on her heel before he could say anything else, pulling out the boxes in her mind and jamming each emotion away. It was easier than it had ever been, and as the door clicked closed behind her, Maureen realized why. The latest generation of sin. And that is the end of chapter 36. Maureen she just can't catch a break. There is so much going on for her and so many complicated emotions and scenarios that is just engulfed right now. And we are so close to the end. We have 2 more chapters left, so I'm going to go ahead and dive right into chapter 37.